So my name's Ieuan. I'm a little man out of the millions in the nation of the British Islands, you know. I'd like to point out that I'm nothing more than a mere common man of flesh and blood, no different than anyone else, no better nor worse than anyone else. What I'm about to upload here is my own perspective on a subject that has annoyed me for many years, as I'm aware it will have done for some of you out there in the world. So you may pay attention to it or ignore me, do as you will, by all means. This video is my video covering SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection, and SRM, solar radiation management, and cloud seeding, which is known as SOAR. However, here I am focusing more on the cloud seeding and the bit of investigation I managed to achieve on this matter, which is overdue, but due to other pressing issues, shall we say, disclosure has been delayed for a year or two. Well, now's time to catch up. Given all that's happening, I felt it important to, shall we say, disclose what little I have found. I've spent nearly 3 years taking videos and photos of the effects of the operations and created 2 videos from the common man's perspective, which had been posted up on YouTube at the time, around 2019. And I believe, well, should I say, believe me, I got some gripe for it, both on Facebook and YouTube at the time, as it was also witnessed at that time the mainstream media had tried to pull and remove media links which I'd used supporting that video surrounding this very topic. However, only weeks after I posted the last of the videos that this happened, these links were returned to an active state about a month later after seriously hounding the media as to why they'd even removed them in the first place. But hey, you can take that for what you like, be it coincidence or not, but I can only say from my angle how it appeared, i.e. suspicious activity. I'd like to point out that these images were normal images, and they are followed by the same image which has been inverted. This is in order so that you can see the clear mess these bumolio cockwombles are making in our skies. I wouldn't mind, but these sycophants are doing this to everyone, including their own families. And as for those that support them, well, enough said, because if you think that what I said in the first place was rude, I won't say what I think of the men or women who try to defend this kind of activity happening in our skies, because I can't promise that it'll be polite or natural in my response. Anyhow, in my years online tackling this topic, I, as others, have come across stiff resistance in relation to this topic. Don't think I need to say any more by now. Most with any interest in this subject will and likely have experienced such kinds of resistance, shall we say, by now, resulting in insult, name-calling for daring to speak or merely even type about this topic, be it in threads or on other people's videos. You get stiff resistance. However, people have in recent years woken up, and I have seen more people now waking up to the fact and realising that cloud seeding and SRM, SAI, geoengineering basically, is something that actually is happening. People are seeing it, but that has taken years for us to keep hammering and hammering and hammering before people have seen it. As the old saying goes, the truth is slow to come out, but when it does, it becomes far more stronger than any lie trying to cover it up. But after the 3 years of investigation, unlike where I found people trying to incite that geoengineering, as in stratospheric aerosol injection or solar radiation management, was the only thing that was happening all the time, I kind of realised from what I had found that those answers to those particular questions became a lot clearer to me. Not that I'm exactly right in what I'm about to tell you. It's just the fact that it became clearer, and that perhaps what we are seeing is cloud seeding more so than the geoengineering. That's not to say that we don't see the geoengineering SAI or SRM, because we do. These days, it is clear most of what can be seen in the images in this slideshow, as they will display, it looks more akin to cloud seeding on an industrial scale. Let's put it this way, if a small plane regarded as a crop seeder, or, if they can sort of spray these gases out, there is nothing stopping a 747 from doing the same operation. And I have photographs that do suggest this kind of thing. The reason cloud seeding is done within the cloud lines, whereas stratospheric or solar radiation management, SRM, SAI, whichever you want to refer to it, is stratospheric in nature, meaning that it's higher up in the sky above the cloud levels, because that's the point. It's designed to reflect sunlight using aerosols. So, and you have to bear with me because I am reading off a script here, and I have to do this on purpose because there's so much here that I need to say that I'm not going to remember all this. It's not to say that we don't see specific types of activity at all, but my guess is that what you'll find, most of it relates to a cloud seeding operations to induce rainfall, and in some cases heavy rainfall, leading to localized flooding, supporting the global boiling agenda, or climate change, whatever the hell you want to call it. And it's also been seen that there is an operation that clearly is there that removes clouds, especially in the summertime, to induce drought. However, I'm sure this operation may fall under a different name, but in the grand scheme of things, it is and does fall under the cloud seeding operation. And its existence is validated because there have been studies done. The original studies that were conducted by the RAF in conjunction with ICI and others, starting officially back in 1949 onwards, in relation to cloud seeding experimentation, first induced by the use of dry ice by the RAF. The results submitted from that in documentation yielded limited results initially back in 1949. But the fact is they were trying it back in 1949. So this has been going on before many of us were born. In terms of cloud clearance, that was then another operation that they started in 1951. So, there's only 2 years difference between these particular types of cloud seeding operation. Now, there are documents out there, and what I've done, rather than to try and explain this in this particular video, is I will post the PDF document I found. Now, I renamed that PDF document Cloud Seeding because it was a couple of years ago. I am buggered if I remember where it came from, but this particular document lists all the reports that were attached to it, so you can possibly try and find them online to see for yourself. But the initial PDF that I found, I will be posting in this video. It was found hidden away in the back of Google search. The PDF does try to suggest limited success, especially with the first test. But then just ask yourself how many years have passed since the 40s and 50s. Then ask how much technology has changed and what we actually know, given geoengineering firms openly admit the use of things like sodium ferrocyanide, which is a chemical in table salts and potashes for cloud seeding purposes. I will get to the sodium ferrocyanide because this is the point. So you go and ask these companies yourself if you don't believe me. This, therefore, suggesting I was not wrong to say that there are two types of cloud seeding operation, because obviously this documentation that I found within this PDF does go some way to suggesting that that is the case, and that the RAF and ICI had investigated it many years ago. People can ask me for a copy should they choose to want it. The solar radiation management, I've noticed, seems to coincide with the drought dispersal cloud seeding operation. And the only reason I see for this, as I said before, whilst there's clearly separate dispersal cloud seeding operation from that induces rainfall, the stratospheric aerosol injection or solar radiation management contributes because it then heats the atmosphere directly under the area of operation. So whilst it's claimed that operation is there to reflect sunlight out to keep global warming down, the trouble is heat does get through it, and when it does, it gets trapped underneath that layer. So it may reflect some heat out, but it also traps it underneath the cloud line that is created by the stratospheric aerosol injection. So the SRM I have noted, or SAI, seems to coincide with the drought dispersal cloud seeding operation. The only reason I see for this, well, whilst there is clearly separate dispersal cloud seeding operation which removes and disperses the cloud, the SRM or SAI then contributes to the heating of the atmosphere directly under the area of operation. Hence, you do see both low and high-flying aircraft committing similar acts, at least visually, on the same days, in the same temperatures, the same height ranges, regardless of the time of year, be it summer or winter, in both nighttime and daytime. Can you see how this helps supporting the global boiling agenda, leading to such droughts that causes fires, or at least makes them a lot easier to start? And as has been noted in recent years, we have seen the authorities disclose most forest fires have been started on purpose. Just look at the fires in Greece, along with a number of other countries this last year in 2023 alone, and then how many of them were actually down to arson in those periods of drought. England last year in 2022, going back to 2018, has seen arson on these drought years increase. For the media to try and report it as global warming, oh no, sorry, climate change, no, sorry, global boiling, or whatever the heck it is you want to actually call it next, only to be foiled and debunked when data is later released by the emergency services, those very same authorities, proving that those very same reported fires by the media are actually caused by arson, not global boiling or whatever tickles your boat. The drought condition is caused by many hours of spraying at both cloud line level and SAI or SRM levels, meaning the stratospheric levels. Usually what you'll see is early in the morning or later in an evening, the cloud clearance operation begin for an hour or so, followed by higher SRM or SAI flyers coming across, or in some cases it happens simultaneously. The same will be seen when they're trying to induce rainfall, funnily enough. Although you tend to see less of the higher SRM and SAI flyers. You'll see a lot more of the cloud seeders. And you'll notice, because where the argument is that geoengineering is happening above the cloud line, well, these planes are flying through the cloud line, spraying their substances within the cloud lines. You have to look, you have to open your eyes, but you can see it, it is there. Now, in some cases, the cloud clearance operations will sometimes completely clear the sky of clouds, especially in the summertime. However, in other instances, the sky turns into a thin white haze, what we refer to as whiteout. And sometimes it can be a complete haze, sometimes it can be a general haze, but it does happen. Anyone with eyes in the head that have seen it before will know exactly what I mean by it. Whereby planes can still be seen flying above that, but you'll find The sun or the daylight is obscured by the white haze that has been created by these planes spraying out their crap. But it's duly noted that the conditions cause a variation into what actually happens. So the result of their operation is not always going to be 100% the same. It's duly noted that the condition causes variation into what actually happens in the end. However, one thing is constant is the muggy heat that's created as a result of the sun's heat. I mean, have you ever noticed how these operations are actually happening? How the heat in the atmosphere around you, it goes really muggy, really hot, really quickly. Even if it was cold in the morning, the temperature changes and it goes muggy. That's why people say about having 3 seasons in one day. It'll be freezing cold in the morning, and then by the afternoon it's bloody boiling, and you're having to take all your jackets off and back into a t-shirt and a thin jumper, or just a t-shirt, depending on the time of year. Try looking up, you might just see it. The initial described official intention of stratospheric aerosol injection, the one that's actually regarded as geoengineering at high level, is that aerosol is supposed to be sprayed and help rebound the heat from the sun back into space. This aerosol obviously contains metals in order for that to have a reflective surface. It's liquefied metal, but that's not the focus. Unfortunately, you see, what these clowns don't take into account is the heat trapped between the Earth and the aerosol cloud line, creating what can be deemed a microwave effect, and thus creating the drought condition. So in essence, if we have SRM or SAI, which supposedly reflects the heat, by injection of the liquefied metals and chemical aerosols, not just up into the sky and back into space, but causing a microwave effect between Earth and the cloud line, while simultaneously warming and trapping the heat under the trail fallout, which is intensified by the smog left in the sky from the bleaching of the sky from those SRM or SAI trails having spread out half an hour after half an hour or so. You have to ask yourself, have you really never noticed the change in temperatures and how quickly the conditions change? Like I said, that muggy heat really quickly surrounding the activity. How else do you think they justify global warming or climate change or climate emergency or global boiling? I mean, come on. All you have to do is look up from time to time for a period of time over days and hours. If you've got the time, don't make excuses. Start opening your eyes, you'll see it. The lies will unfold before your very eyes. It happens to be one of the most obvious lies ever told to people en masse, laying there right before you, plain as day for you to even see yourself. They talk about evidence, but like we take photographs and video footage of this stuff, it is evidence. It might not be evidence of what exactly they're spraying, but it is evidence that they are spraying something. The authority types in the past have even admitted a case for accidental geoengineering caused by contrails as an excuse to evade liability and keep the people shut up and dumb. Either way you want to argue it, geoengineering is admitted accidentally, if not by design. So ask yourself, why is it on the very same day, very same hour, you can see one or two planes with a chemtrail, or one or two with a contrail, or even planes with no trail at all, in the same airspace, roughly at the same height, same day and same temperature, or even in the night? How does it not throw out any argument that chemtrails or even contrails sold to you by the mainstream media are natural at all? You see, the media will tell you, oh, the long trails are persistent trails, they only happen in winter. It happens to all aircraft when it's cold at height, or, oh, but longer trails happen at higher altitudes because it's colder, etc., etc. Again, you have to ask why it is on the very same day, the very same location, and the very same temperatures, you can have planes at the same height or in the same airspace with contrails, chemtrails, and no trails at all? Or ask yourself, is it to do with the height and temperature of the plane? When you have a plane with no trail at all that's flying higher than one with a chemtrail. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Because I've seen this on a number of occasions. Planes flying with no trails at all higher than those that are spraying. And we refer to them, technically speaking, as chemtrails. I've seen and recorded this behaviour dozens of times, debunking these claims myself, alone, in both winter and summer. Their arguments always fall apart. It always has. They didn't refer to chemtrails as persistent trails until recently. The first time I noticed it was around 2018. Apparently, going through certain FOIs, it has been referenced more so by the military or authority figures. But as far as the mainstream media coining the term, it wasn't until around the 2018 period of time. Yet, chemtrails have been debated in the mainstream media since at least 2005, 2006, and from what I'm personally aware of, the excuses never existed at the time when these arguments started. It's almost as if they've used these excuses as a means to catch up, to keep people blind as to what's happening above their heads and try and normalise it. Did you notice in the pandemic in 2020, in the first few months of the pandemic, they banned flights abroad? And they managed to do that before they forced people to wear masks. Yeah, but not before people had been travelling abroad from China, given that the virus had broken out in November of 2019, apparently. Did you not notice the difference in the temperatures in the skies when that flight ban was in place compared to the usual circumstances? And back in around about, it was actually around April, May time of 2020 when this happened. Did you not notice how normal the temperatures compared to other years at the same period of time in those years? Did you not notice how normal the temperatures were in comparison when there were no slug trails in the sky? One thing with the pandemic is the fact that all excuses to deny the effects of geoengineering, be it accidental or on purpose, were completely destroyed and debunked. Images of 2019 skies next to 2020 skies, I've actually supplied them within this video, in the hopes that you can at least see visually the difference in the skies. I mean, we could go through every excuse we've ever heard, being called conspiracy theorists. We've heard all these excuses from these people that try to debunk and claim that geoengineering doesn't exist in our skies. But if I went through every single one of those, I'd be here all day. I mean, I've heard some corkers over the years, like, "You're near an airport, so it must be planes circling to land." What, in a straight fucking line? Come on, the clue's in the name. Circling to land. They don't sodding circle in straight lines, do they? For those with a brain in their skull, really, I shouldn't need to go through every excuse right now, and nor will I. It might make a great comedy video, and perhaps I might do it one day, but this video will go on forever if I do it right now. And I'll be quite frankly honest, I've looked at this subject for a number of years now, and this subject bores the tits off me, if I'm honest, partly due to the fact that people never listen until it's too fucking late. My apologies for my language. So back in 2020 and 2021, and this is where we get to the real point. I had identified what I thought to be the answer to this question. Not that I'm special or I'm asking for credit, because I could still be wrong to a degree. But it was based on something that was actually suggested loosely by David Icke in one of his videos some years ago, around 2006 and 2007. And that was the time when I started with all this, when I first had a computer, because I was living on my own in my own flat. My parents wouldn't allow me to have the internet for whatever reason. Moving on, the point is, in this video, the loose term was that the government were not necessarily spraying poisons over people. So what David was trying to say was, look, they're not There's no proof that they are actually spraying anything specific over people. However, what it doesn't mean is that they're not spraying, I know this sounds backwards, but it doesn't mean that they're not spraying something else which can trigger a reaction, right? What he was getting at was, it's like a key. Rather than them spraying something specific to cause people illness and problems, they spray something that's benign in the sky, something that people think doesn't do any harm. And unless they look closely, they won't see it. But there is a particular key in that substance which releases a reaction with what's in the sky, creating a chemical reaction. And this is where we are going with cloud seeding specifically. Because of this, it leaves the governments and the likes free from blame, because there's no direct link to them, no paper trail to the activity under its name of cloud seeding or geoengineering, nothing that can leave it to be open to blame for purposely poisoning people. Over the years, I'd looked at this. However, due to my own circumstances later on, I had to leave the, let's say, research ring for a while, because I had no choice but to deal with my own problems, returning a few years later under more difficult circumstances, but still looking into it bit by bit, because that's the only way I could. You can only deal with so many battles in this world. You can't deal with all of them at once. We have to prioritise. So it had me thinking for many years. And not being a scientific man per se, I don't profess to be a scientist, I could not make sense of it. That wasn't until 2020, years after, after on and off research, to then later during the pandemic, an investigation into cloud seeding operations in relation to COVID, I started submitting various FOI requests to the likes of the BEIS and the MOD in the Britain, or the British Islands, or the UK, as some people like to keep calling it, even though that's the name of a corporation. Anyway, as I'd seen other people ask previously in their own FOIs, it also appeared I made the same mistakes in the first place. The mistakes being in the way that we were making the questions. They were always aimed at asking if geoengineering was something that was engaged in, or cloud seeding. Now, I did get an answer at the time, but only of that which admitted the information. In essence, it admitted the information existed, but they weren't going to provide it, despite the stupid wording as if to say they couldn't answer one way or another because it wasn't in the public interest. The fact is, in a fashion, they have already admitted it. No matter how much they try to hide it with the wording, it's there, because you just turn around and say, no, we haven't got the information, if you haven't got the information. But reading between the lines, we know exactly what that means, really. So clearly the correct direction was to identify what exactly the risky chemical could be used in such an operation, and work on asking the questions based on that instead of persisting on asking about a general term which had been asked 1,000 times over, possibly because unless you research and research again, those questions are not clear. So you can only ask, generally speaking, if something exists. So, on investigation of my own, then came the point when I looked closer at cloud seeding in itself. And obviously that involved looking at the salts. And it jumped out at me on the kitchen table what general salt has in it, because it has sodium ferrocyanide as well as the salt. And it's also a consistent factor with many of the salts used and produced. And on further investigation, it's also the case with potash, also used in cloud seeding operations, usually in the flares used for such operations. It took some emailing, asking questions, to which some companies were a little more clearer than others. For example, when I emailed various potash companies in relation to sodium ferrocyanide use, they didn't want to respond, whereas the US companies did openly respond and admit that cloud seeding were operational, and yes, they did use things like salts and potash with ferrocyanide in it. I obviously had issues trying to talk to some of these companies because obviously if they think you're a nutter anyway or a conspiracy theorist, they just won't respond to you. So I did have to use an approach which suggested I was a university student. Needless to say, my nose grew a few feet. Pinocchio, well, he'd have been jealous. Given I knew that stratospheric aerosol injection, or SRM, solar radiation management, had severe risk attached to it already because of the countless numbers of people online that have looked into it over the years, I also knew, given that I knew about sodium ferrocyanide, that cloud seeding also had some form of risk to it. But not being a scientist, I didn't spot it straight away until I did some research. So, beyond stealing rain theories, which is what a lot of people fall back to with the cloud seeding argument, it's claimed to be the safest geoengineering technique, but clearly, especially with what I found, it isn't as safe as people are told it is. Because there is a serious problem going back to the sodium ferrocyanide within the salts, which I will explain. For years, especially after 2005, The Guardian had, for one example of a media outlet, had produced numerous reports on cloud seeding and showing off about the fact that China and the United Arab Emirates, as well as other countries and companies, had been engaged in showing off about such weather modification programs. So it's no secret, despite the British media and the corporate government cover up and reliance in the use of denial and ridicule over the matter, it should be no surprise that, this is the case. Further to this, I did get admission from the United Arab Emirates, who admitted by email that they do engage in cloud seeding quite openly. And yeah, it was just as easy to email and ask. You could do it yourself. Whether you get the same results now or not, I don't know. But on further investigation, it did seem to come to a dead end after that point, because I was advised to go somewhere else and ask the questions there. But again, I came to a dead end and no response. So the point is, if you want answers, you have to look, and look very hard. They are out there if you look hard enough. So let's get to the salt and why that's important. Nice and innocent, isn't it? Or is it? It's used to kill pests and used to heal. It depends on the type of salt. Processed salt contains a second ingredient. You see it listed on any shop bought table salt, powdered salt. It's an anti-caking agent. It's placed in to help the transportation and delivery of the salt, as it prevents the salt from reforming into a rock-like formation or clumping up. On investigation involving web searches of salt companies, web pages like British Salt, for example, I found this rather interesting. The most common type of agent used across the salt industry was sodium ferrocyanide, which may explain later why table salt can be used in gardening as homemade, as a homemade weed killer or slug killer. And unlike sea salt, which is used for its healing properties, there are different types of studies which suggest sodium ferrocyanide has links but not proven to the causes and cases of Alzheimer's. We do see Alzheimer's being on the increase, yet nothing conclusive. So there leaves a very big black hole of a question mark when you care to think about it. It's also claimed by the Food Standard Agency that sodium ferrocyanide is completely safe for the use of the food industry, and probably why it's also, by the likes of British Salt and others, is used for other wider applications. Fair enough, you may try to say, but there is one big problem with sodium ferrocyanide which doesn't seem to be taken into account or heavily denied. Sodium ferrocyanide, once introduced to acid, creates a reaction that produces hydrogen cyanide gases. Hydrogen cyanide gases are toxic and poisonous to humans as well as other forms of life. I couldn't see anything to indicate what exactly the level or strength of the acid had to be in order to cause that reaction, meaning one could only deduce that this should mean don't mix any acids with ferrocyanide loaded products if you want to be on the safe side. I mean, I could be wrong, but I do have to ask. So perhaps you might think twice before putting that vinegar with your standard table salt when eating your fish and chips. I'd stick with sea salt if I were you. And since table salts can be used for pest control, it does make me wonder if salt in itself in high doses can be toxic, as it is. But funny this, there appears to be no safety note on, salt products from the shelf explaining this point, possibly because when the industry experts tested sodium ferrocyanide or even potassium ferrocyanide, they never cared to look into and study exactly what happens if other acidic ingredients are used in food, possibly forgetting or just not thinking to consider that vinegar is effectively still a form of acid, especially if research was only aimed at pure acid. It has to be noted that nowhere could I find any true notes on the reaction of the salt and sodium ferrocyanide with vinegar to be able to even suggest it is completely safe. And we know what profit does where safety is concerned. Profit always overrides safety. So where am I actually going with this? Well, the presumption any acid could cause this reaction. Let's start with the fact that salt is used for many reasons, both in food and non-food related. One of those non-food related reasons happens to be water purification. Again, British Salt produces it for the specific needs of certain companies, suggesting ingredient levels can be altered depending on the requirements and the request given to British Salt. But I suggest it depends on the company in question and what they need it for. And just for the sakes of argument, just look at Aquasol salt that is provided by the likes of British Salt. This contains both arsenic, which is questionable in itself, given, it's in our water supply, but that's not really the focus here, and sodium ferrocyanide, and of which is in higher levels, perhaps, than in food-related salts. So now building on that, a question that has to be asked to adjoin these points is, what in nature contains acid? Something eco groups like Greenpeace, etc., have claimed to have been campaigning about for years. Well, it goes back to the 70s and 80s, doesn't it? Maybe even a little bit earlier than that. You may be younger than me, so I'll have to just tell you it is acid rain, which is what? Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, which create what? Acid rain, including sulfuric acid, nitric acid, carbonic acid, as it's actually referenced to in its chemical terms. So if you still don't get that, well, that's fine. You will do soon, with any luck. In addition to this, the only studies I could find close enough showing the following: they originated from areas around the food standards departments and could, for all intents and purposes, be prejudiced by bias. So we need to bear in mind that these are the chemicals that we're talking about here. The chemical that's produced if the sodium ferrocyanide reacts is hydrogen cyanide, HCN. Sodium ferrocyanide itself, Na4Fe, open bracket, Cn, close bracket 6. Sulfuric acid, H2SO4. Nitric acid, HNO3, strongest of the acids in acid rain, responsible for erosion. And then you have carbonic acid, H2CO3. For example, the strongest acid, as we said before, was nitric acid. It is suggested that exposure, which is the worst of the three acids and the strongest acid content, can cause irritation to the eyes, skin, and mucous membrane. It can cause delayed pulmonary edemas and pneumonitis, bronchitis, and even dental erosion. Well, think about that if it's going in the water supply as well. Nitric acid is highly corrosive. Workers may be harmed from exposure to nitric acid, which is also in industry. Unfortunately, human industry activity produces more additional acid-forming compounds in far greater quantities than natural sources of acidity described above. In some areas of the United States, the pH of rainwater can be 3.0 or lower, approximately 1,000 times more acidic than normal rainwater. In 1982, the pH of a fog on the west coast of the United States was measured at 1.8. When the rainwater is too acidic, it can cause problems ranging from killing freshwater fish, damaging crops, to eroding buildings and monuments. And just think what it can do to people. So pause right there and take that in. Corporations have been causing acidic rain in the first place for years because of the industry led by commerce and the demand of people, which was created by industries' advertisement that the people even needed those products in the first place. Whilst they're sitting there blaming the little people, it was always the corporations. So let's just follow the closest related study that I could find, which was in relation to potassium ferrocyanide, which is similar. And according to the Standards Agency, the reason they're safe is because they don't freely release cyanide. Pay attention to the word freely, because it has low toxicity. And keep in mind that low toxicity doesn't mean no toxicity at all. Its main hazard being that it's a mild irritant to the eyes and the skin. However, under strong acidic conditions, which nitric acid is, highly toxic hydrogen cyanide gases can be evolved or created according to certain equations. So, whilst yes, in of itself, sodium ferrocyanide can be described as benign, the fact that they say it doesn't freely release cyanide doesn't mean to say it can't release cyanide gases at all. Just the same as to say that just because they say it's low toxicity doesn't mean to say it isn't toxic. It's all about words and trickery upon you in the hopes that you don't notice these little hints. The clue is in the word freely, as with the description low toxicity, i.e. introduce a second element like nitric acid plus other acids, then the likelihood that this turns into a very, very different story grows. I mean, come on, think about it. They're spraying salts in the sky with ferrocyanide in it. That reacts with the nitric acid and possibly even the carbonic acid and, creates hydrogen cyanide gases. 2 and 2 don't equal 5, do they? So it's clear that the Food Standard Agency is using a trickery of words to try and trick you into believing that ferrocyanide in salt is safe, especially to those not paying enough attention. Do you not even think that drinking water, your own tap water, if it has treatment in it that contains arsenic, is not a good idea either? Not to mention the other various chemicals and levels of ferrocyanide in those salts that are used to treat water, as these could cause issues in themselves for people. Is it any wonder that fish species could be going extinct or birds coming down with supposed bird flu? Like the so-called authorities are going to admit that this activity causes those issues? Of course they're not. I mean, think, if acid rain alone causes problems with freshwater fish, as well as being responsible for building erosion because of the nitric acid content, then throw in the mix the hydrogen and cyanide gases that are created if ferrocyanide is sprayed over the rain clouds with the salts, that could easily intoxicate high-flying or migratory birds that are caused by these chemicals that are being sprayed out of these aircraft and reacting with the acids in the acidic rain clouds. Well, where does that rain fall? And just take a moment to consider. Where does it fall? It falls down to the ground, into the rivers, into the seas. If you're having rainfall with acid in it, it's still also going to react, a certain amount of it is still going to react when it touches the ground with your drinking waters, isn't it? with the farmlands, the natural lands, and it'll affect the wildlife and our animals that rely on the drinking waters that we rely on. All of this contributes to hydrogen cyanide being created and erosion and etc. etc. And we wonder why we're seeing the problems we're seeing. Are you going to question me, the little man, for daring to mention this, and I may not have done it perfectly? Or have you yet realised I'm not the man you should be questioning? Let me ask another question that perhaps might just clear all this up. What happens when some clown decides it'd be a brilliant idea to try and make it rain using varied techniques like cloud seeding? And here's the kicker: if they're choosing to initiate that rainfall with one of those things being customised, or even if it really is just table salt, salt's designed to be sprayed out of a plane, and given what I've just explained, how can it be so safe to suggest that cloud seeding is even safe anyway, when there's no way of knowing what happens when the sodium ferrocyanide reacts with the acids, especially if no study exists to clarify that point properly? It is the plausibility that I would say personally needs to be researched rather quickly, given that 56 countries admittedly partake in this activity worldwide, even if it is possibly too late. The old saying goes, it's better late than never at all. These questions need to be raised. It strikes me, even when I write FOIs to the BEIS or the MOD, and they admit they have no information in relation to the question of the chemical reaction. You'll see the FOIs posted in this video as well. You know, if they can't even answer a simple question like that, then clearly, or at least admit that they haven't got information, then that should say a lot to people. They haven't even researched the effects because they don't deem it necessary to do so. I mean, even if you could argue that the hydrogen cyanide levels were minimal due to dilution, there's two things they didn't consider, and that was the impact on wildlife and various bird species and insect species and plants and humans and livestock. You know, and we're not just talking about the odd plane committing to this activity. We're talking about daily exposure over prolonged periods of time. Whilst this may not kill people or animals straight away, it doesn't mean to say it doesn't have effects medically or biologically. People complain about the stunted growth of plants causing famines and all the rest of it, and yet it always seems to be, when you hear about it, the same countries that have this activity happening over their very heads and are exposed to such chemical reactions. So there are questions in relation to long-term illnesses like Alzheimer's and cancer, etc., which could explain why so much of it is actually about because of cloud seeding activities that have been happening for years. And you can throw SAI and SRM into that mix, stratospheric aerosol injection or solar radiation management, because they have equally just as much to answer for. Can you, in addition, not see the plausibility of viruses being purposely spread by such operations as well? Given that we know about Wuhan and the admission that the virus of 2020 was manufactured and has been admitted so recently on a number of occasions, even by some media outlets, and given the military name that we noted at the time, why should it be surprising? The very fact that in November 2019, just before the pandemic was announced in Britain, more people were being diagnosed with pneumonia than we'd ever heard of before. And this activity at that time, I recorded and showed in my video in 2019 leading up to the pandemic. The skies were full of trails. Nearly every other man or woman we knew of was being diagnosed all of a sudden with pneumonia. Up until 2020, of course, when all of a sudden, all flu and pneumonia all of a sudden disappeared and everybody was being diagnosed with COVID-19 out of complete paranoia, leading to a lockdown of March 2020. Oh, I really could go on, but I shouldn't need to, because you'll know enough by now. And I'll only ask, have you seen the COVID inquiry this last year? in addition to that, ongoing. And how can you ever trust these cretins in power to care for your health ever again, given what's happened and who was involved? And are you still going to be injecting yourself with that untested COVID jab? Well, if you are, I advise you wake up and you just will stop it, because if you don't, burying your head in the sand will only land you 6 foot under the sand. The rest of the world is waking up, so why in God's name haven't you? Look, in the end, I'm no scientist or expert at the end of the day. You know, just because a man presents himself in a shirt and tie with a perfect haircut and shoes you can see your face in, it doesn't mean to say he knows any more than you. In fact, in my experience, the exact opposite tends to be the case. I am just a fancy horse scratching post. But if a fancy horse scratching post can spot this point, how can the experts of this world and the eco-warriors of this world haven't? Is it because they don't want to, because they're not allowed to? You know, and to boot, why does Extinction Rebellion, Greenpeace, as well as others that I've tried to ask, why is it they choose to ignore it and try to claim that it doesn't even exist, even though there's plenty of information out there, even from media sources, that says it does exist, be it geoengineering or cloud seeding? Is it because they know that they've got to continue towing that line, pretending that this doesn't exist? Because woe betide if the truth ever comes out and they have to admit that, yes, we are committing acts of geoengineering above all your heads without your permission. I may be wrong, but at least I'm trying. At least I'm trying to tell you what I've found. But you will only see the truth if you care to look for it yourself. You don't need to take my word for any of this. I, like so many others in the world, do care, as we only have one planet, and I don't blame British Salt Company, by the way. This one goes above their heads, they're just supplying the product. It's down to the companies that are using it. And bear in mind, the companies and corporations also include the likes of the British government, UK Limited, or PLC as some people like to call it, because they are a corporation and a company, which happens to have struck off in September and now are dissolved, apparently. That's a big question in itself, isn't it? Who's leading the country again? Anyway, it's not a choice that was given to people of this nation or anywhere else in the world to have chemicals sprayed above their heads or have a chemical reaction created by chemicals that are being sprayed above our heads. Because let's go back to the main point where I said about David Icke and the fact that he was saying that it's a reaction that's being caused rather than the chemical that's being sprayed. Well, that reaction can't be caused without the chemical, ferrocyanide. So in essence, yes, there is a chemical being sprayed. You can argue that salt isn't a chemical, but it is. Technically speaking, it is a chemical, a natural one. Anyway, you make your own mind up. And if you still want to pretend to yourself in this world it's all hunky-dory, you feel free. You want to pretend despite all you're told that it's just conspiracy theory after all these years, you go ahead, indeed. But don't you dare sit there and say that nobody tried to warn you at all, because we have. I would say that this is the end, but the real question is it the end? Because there are many reasons why this subject annoys me, not least is the effect that I've witnessed it have on even my own rescued dog for the last 5 years. We got him from a rescue home, and he had an ear infection, and I've witnessed how this activity, especially in relation to its humidity, which is caused by the SRMSAI or cloud seeding operations, whichever you want to point at, I've noticed 9 times out of 10 this contributing factor to his condition getting worse, because it's temporary. When it does get worse, it can be brought back under control, but every time this activity happens in sync with his condition gets worse. So, you know, you can try and argue that it doesn't affect animals when clearly it does, and if it affects them, then it can affect us. And it can affect wild birds, insects, Like I said before, 2 and 2 doesn't equal 5. So, how does it affect people in the long term? Is this really why we're seeing things like Alzheimer's on the increase? The authorities will never admit it. The NHS wouldn't admit it because they're not allowed to admit it because the authorities won't admit it. And the NHS are under the authorities, as we saw with the Pratdemic. So it should be no surprise, given the description of what nitric acid alone can cause, that throwing in hydrogen cyanide gases, which are created from the ferrocyanide, absolutely must have long-term consequences for people everywhere, especially where cloud seeding operations are happening. This is a real question of importance that nobody wants to answer, other than with ridicule, of course. Not to mention, yesterday, and bearing in mind the date that I post this, yesterday, well, let me just check. We're on the 8th of October 2023. Well, on the 7th, there was flooding in Scotland. And yesterday, in this area in Cheshire, there was heavy cloud seeding, as there is today on the 8th of October. So that, in conjunction with the floods in Scotland, and you're telling me that cloud seeding has no effect, when even in the 1950s, there were reports that cloud seeding had caused severe flooding. So, how do we get down to the point of proving any of this with material evidence? Well, it has to be done scientifically, doesn't it? I mean, how many people out there have microscopes? How many have the ability to take samples? I mean, we run a smallhold, so I don't have time to be that perfect about the way that I investigate this, but there are people out there who do. And that's the point. Why aren't they doing it? If we, with animals, be it with us or farmers, are the ones pointing all this stuff out, where are the experts that so-called know all this stuff? Why aren't they bringing this to the fold and bringing it out to the public and proving that this is going and has been causing problems to people everywhere where this activity has been taking place? So during the pandemic, around the same time, I placed COVID test kits under the microscope. This is what I did, right? And the video's up on YouTube. You can see it. I will put the link in the description if I remember. And there was one element that appeared not just in the test kits for COVID, but also this same element appeared in the rainwater samples I put out during cloud seeding operations. I only did it once or twice as a bit of an experiment. And we found this element appeared in both the test kits and what had fallen out of the sky from the cloud seeding operations, which seemed rather bizarre. Those images will be posted so you can see what I mean. So I have to ask, who's game and willing to get to the bottom of this once and for all? Surely some of you backstreet scientists can put yourselves up to some real use and help put a stop to this madness by providing the material evidence that's needed. We know that the authorities manipulate this information, so it needs people who are prepared to put themselves out and do this. You may ask how? Well, simple experiments to start with. Place tubs of clean water, or at least water you can have checked under a microscope first, to check its purity levels, so you know what's in there already. Take notes and photographs and images of what's in those water samples so that you've got a comparison to start with. You then put those samples out, around your property. Put them out as early as you can, first thing in the morning, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And at the end of the day, when the day's passed, take those samples back into the house, place them under the microscope, see what's changed. Taking images, proving the difference between your morning samples and your evening samples. Then share those results with others so that they can review your findings as well. To start, and I think personally that is quite simple for people to do, And the rules for your test are pretty simple. I mean, it's just making sure your hands are clean before handling any equipment. Make sure you're wearing sterile gloves at all times to avoid contaminating your samples. Make sure that your tubs and equipment are always clean before you start the experiment. This way you cancel out any contamination from other things. I'm sure that backstreet scientists wouldn't need to be told this. But what I'm saying is, after that, if you do the experiments yourselves and you know what you're doing and you're so good at this and you out there can put this to bed once and for all, and then you can follow up with legal notices upon CEOs of the various companies in existence that perhaps are doing geoengineering, and they can be found. You've just got to look hard enough. So, you know, when you have men like Luke Ieuan in the world, in the United States, with a company like Make Sunsets, sort of putting patents all over the world to be able to spray whatever they want to spray, which is actually geoengineering. If you've never heard of Make Sunsets, I suggest you look them up. There'll be quite a few people out there that are from this background that'll know who I'm on about. And you try looking up their addresses. They lead to no physical location and seem to suggest that they originate out of a courier's office. Well, that's always, what shall we say, suspicious in my mind. And what's more suspicious is that certain US officials have been linked to this company Make Sunsets. The point being that they want to use balloons to alter our skies, spraying certain chemicals out to change the way the skies are, under the claim that it's for controlling the climate. Trying to justify the purpose of stratospheric aerosol injection with an idea that was actually conceived years ago and actually advertised by the likes of the BBC. These recent so-called spy balloons that were blamed on China. Are you sure that actually that's not a ruse and that these balloons didn't actually belong to those in companies like Make Sunsets under the control of people like Luke Ieuan? Perhaps these balloons weren't Chinese, perhaps they were American all along. I know that from what I've seen that some US officials have taken umbrage to what this company Make Sunsets is trying to do, whilst other US officials seem to be supporting it, supporting a company that seems to belong to a courier service or office out in the middle of nowhere with no real location or office. Point being is it a ruse on the public to try and suggest the likes of SRM or SAI are brand new techniques when clearly they are not? Most, like some in the world, are trying desperately to cover the tracks and rewrite actual history that has been proven to exist. When they say the world's gone mad, it went mad years ago, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't change that. Try looking up into the skies every now and again. You'll see it yourselves. So you have cloud seeding, which induces the rainfall, which can be used to drown out farmers' crops or drown out towns and cities. This is how it can be used as a weapon, of course. But it can also be used on the sly to make it look like it's global warming, causing problems, causing too much rainfall, destroying crops, raising the prices of food, and we know where that goes, don't we? On the other side, you've got the drought side, which dries out the land so that it makes it easier to start fires, or fires do start naturally because of it. In most cases, as I've said before, it appears that a lot seems to be caused more by arson than it does by nature. So you can see how these kind of systems to manipulate the weather can be used against the public by the authorities in question. Not that they're ever going to admit it, and in some ways we say the authorities, what we're talking about is the real authorities that are hiding behind the act that we see that is called the authorities. Given what we also know about Extinction Rebellion, about Greenpeace, about Just Stop Oil, all being registered as companies, not just charities, but as companies. That means that they have only one focus, and that's around profit and money, because you don't register yourself as a company and a corporation unless your interest is in money. So how do you think that plays into the green agenda, with all these businesses that want to profit from renewable energy and green energy technologies that we know very well have issues attached to them? So then ask yourself where the cloud seeding and the SAI or SRM plays into all this. It should be pretty blatantly obvious by now without me having to go any further on that point. This happens to be another point. Now, I know that where cloud seeding, chemtrailing and all the rest of it's concerned, because we've videoed and photographed these planes in the sky, and we are aware that these aircraft contain company logos. But this was covered in my earlier videos that I did back in 2019 as to why, in the sense that they may hire their logos out to these geoengineering firms or cloud seeding firms. So just bear that in mind and go and visit those videos if you want to understand that aspect, saving me having to repeat all of it all over again.